Hello, everybody, and welcome to TNM Coaching Unplugged and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected podcast. We're so grateful and happy that you're with us once again, listening to this elevation of your heart, elevation of your soul, elevation of your body to the next level of itself. This is the space when you tune into these wonderful guests that I'm introducing week after week to help you out live the best possible version of yourself, to live this optimum life. And today we have a very interesting friend with a beautiful story behind him that we're going to share. Nico Andonakis is joining us, and he is somebody who is working really intensely to redefine masculinity and to help men realize that optimum self. He's also supporting men to break free from the boundaries and expectations when it comes to what it means to be a man in this modern society today. He's also working, coaching, mentoring, guiding men to help them heal shame, guilt on their journey of becoming this optimal man. He's also introducing radical honesty and supporting men to initiate into a pure new masculinity by finding comfort in discomfort. So when you come to work with Nico and you coach and you spend time with him, you will be able to understand your self-worth and your life purpose, which I think is extremely important nowadays, especially if you're a man. How do you step into that space of understanding who you are, what is your worth, and what did you come here to do? And also he's supporting men to find their place in the world. He's at the same time initiating men into powerful work with their body. How can we as men create this amazing body image, how to build and then how to extend our body so that we live comfortable in our bodies, and not only comfortable, but that we're proud of our bodies as well. And then also he's talking to men and supporting men to initiate into their sexuality, which is a big topic as well, in a way that he's supporting men to find that confidence in themselves, to ravish their partners to the extreme enjoyment for both of them, and to really enjoy sexuality in a most beautiful way. So men around the world are grateful to Nico for the support, help, and love and guidance. And I'm so grateful and happy to have Nico on the podcast today. So welcome, Nico.
Wow, Zoran, what an amazing intro. Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here as well. We're both based here in the Ibiza. Thank you very much for the intro, and looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, so when I was kind of preparing for this podcast, and I love having you with us as well, because this topic of being a man in a modern society is extremely important, nowadays. There's a lot of talk about feminine energy, initiation of the divine feminine, and women stepping in their power. And at the same time, we're kind of neglecting men, we're putting them behind, and we're just tagging along. So for me, there's always a joy and pleasure when we have these open conversations about supporting, helping men to become the best possible version of themselves. And I know that you have an interesting story in your life. How did you come up into the space of being mentor, coach, guide, and teacher to other men around you? So if you don't mind, let's start with that. What is your story, and how did you end up being here at this moment in time?
Sure. There's a long story and a short story. The quick answer is a heartbreak. So I started my introspective journey 11 years ago when I moved from Australia, where I was born, and I left everything, my family, my work, my friends, to come and learn a new language, a new culture, and arrived in Ibiza in 2014. That's when the introspective journey started. However, it was in October 2022, so 18 months ago, 2021, so 18 months ago, when I was about 3 years out of a 12-year marriage with my ex-wife, Madalena. And 12 years of marriage, the last sort of years got a little bit stale, so it wasn't really a heartbreak. A few years after that, I was with a girlfriend. We were together for 4 or 5 months, and she decided to end the relationship. And looking back now, was the first time when a girl would, one of my partners, one of my girlfriends, let's say, decided to end the relationship. And Zoran, it was tough. It was so difficult. And I recall there was a very, very good friend of mine. His name is Jamie Lorenz. And I called him and he hung up the call and he called me back on video because he wanted to see me in his despair and this space that I was in. And the first time in my life, I just said, Jamie, I'm sorry, but I need to cry. And for about 5, 6, 7 minutes, there was no words. It was just me crying and crying and crying and crying. And I was so ashamed to cry in front of another man, in front of one of my best friends. I was so ashamed. And before I even had to wipe all the tears off my face and before I got a word in, he just looked at me and he said, Nico, I've known you for many years. And this is the most beautiful, authentic, truest version of you that I had ever seen. And when he said that to me, in amidst all the suffering of the rejection and the loneliness and the abandon that I was feeling, he just threw this huge blanket of confusion over all of that because he's now telling me it's okay to cry in front of other men. And when he said that, he said, it's beautiful what you're doing. I didn't know what to respond or how to respond. And that was the catalyst. That was 18 months ago. And since then, I've realized, unfortunately, as men in today's society, we don't go to initiation. We don't have the proper skills and tools and resources to understand that, firstly, we are not men per se, we are human beings. And human beings, males and females alike, guess what? We're both emotional beings. So when we're taught at 4 years old and 5 years old by our father or by our school teacher or by our soccer coach, don't cry, man up, don't show your vulnerabilities, 40 years after, I refer to like the trash can. You can only put so much trash into the bin and press it and press it and press it, but there's going to be one point when one piece of trash spills over. And that's basically what happened to me that afternoon.
So you step into your full authenticity, vulnerability, and you gave yourself permission, basically to show yourself authentically, which is something that not many of men have courage to do, I would say.
Absolutely. It was, it's what I like to call our radical honesty. And it's, if I'm feeling something inside for the first 40 years until I had this inflection point in my life, this initiation of being mad and don't cry and don't show your weaknesses is telling us, is building this this false notion, don't share it, keep it inside. And one of the biggest revelations I've had in the last 18 months that, a female, for example, 9 times out of 10, a female, a girl's going to wake up, if she feels sad, rejected, lonely, whatever she's feeling, her innate intelligence is going to tell her to pick up the phone and call one of her female friends. It's like this invisible support structure they have. However, for us guys, it's a little bit more difficult. We don't have that strength to go into the vulnerability. And one of the biggest revelations that I've had in the last 18 months and sharing with many men that I work with is that we suffer in silence. And the silence, that suffering in isolation, that silence is what is really, really hurting us. So I offered a men's retreat last month here in Ibiza, and basically to build a safe space. So after the guys build the trust and the confidence to share these vulnerabilities, immediately the suffering, the isolation, it's gone. So whatever, that part of the suffering is gone and the healing automatically starts. So once that healing has started, because you've shared it, you remove the isolation, that's when the real healing is allowed to happen. And for the last 18 months, I've just been on this journey of sharing more and more and more of stuff that doesn't belong inside. It needs to be shared so I can get it off my chest and understand that a lot of the time, it only lives in one place in my imagination. It's not even real.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. It's a lot of things are in my imagination. So in order for us to share, you mentioned that we need to build a container of safety, trust, connection with other men around us, especially when we don't know them that well, like what you mentioned, your best friend. So how do we create that? What do we need as men in order for us to be able to open up, and radically share with radical honesty? And I love that term, radical honesty. I think it's so important because it really purifies the soul and it gets us to really be honest with ourselves and others. But what is needed for somebody to just get to that space of being willing to share?
Right. Great question, but it's very, very easy. Practice. If you want to do good handstands, what do you need to do every single day? You need to jump up, you need to practice handstands. If you want to be able to get into the practice of understanding that, I'm feeling something right now, I'm feeling nervous, angry, agitated, and it's because I'm not sharing. You need to practice. So you need to build a support structure. You need to, first thing is have a look at all your friends and identify your closest friends. And how many of those guys can you have a sit down, one-on-one conversation with and say, man, today I'm feeling sad. Today I'm feeling lonely. Today I feel like I could really lend a hand from you if you can. You know, it's this notion that we have is like, hey, bro, I love you, bro. It's really just, it doesn't really mean much. And when you stop and you look at your brother in your eyes and say, hey, I really love you. I acknowledge, I appreciate you. That's the difference. And it's practicing. So it's first understanding which of your friends are actually, you know, dare I say, your real friends that can actually be there for you to listen and to receive what it is that you have to share, what you have to share. And once you understand that there's these different people, different men in your lives, and maybe it's outside of friends, maybe it's colleagues, maybe it's your father, maybe it's a mentor you have, but it's practice, practice, practice. Because in my experience, when working with many men, it's the beginning which is the hardest. It's like, how can I share that? You know, how can I actually share that I'm ashamed that my wife doesn't want to make love with me anymore? This is tough. And the only way you can do it is by practicing and by sharing it with one person and two people. And then once the deep stuff comes out, then it just flows.
Yeah, exactly. I completely get that. I mean, and it's also courage to be imperfect in a way. And you mentioned, you know, on one of your websites that, you know, you also support men work through that shame and guilt. And I guess this is also linked when we begin practicing sharing and being radically honest with ourselves and with the people around us. We need to move through that passage of feeling that shame and feeling that guilt. And despite of us feeling this guilt and shame, keep on opening up. So from your perception of yourself and others, how do we move through that guilt and shame? And what really happens when we hit those? Like, oh my God, I'm tensing up because I feel so ashamed to even say this, right? And when I say it, then I feel guilty because, you know, this is part of who I am. This is my experience. So I feel people will judge me, you know, and I will judge myself. So how do we move through that landscape of guilt and shame?
Right. First thing that I introduce to all men is this notion that it is shame and guilt which is castrating us as men. We have to understand that when we look into it from childhood wounds, you know, from childhood through to our adolescence into our early 20s, etc., we are carrying so much shame and guilt connected to our masculine core. And it's this shame and this guilt, which, like I said before, is absolutely castrating us. It's not giving us our voice. It's not giving us the power and the ability to share, hey, I don't feel well today. I'm a human being. I have emotions, and it's okay for me to share that. And it's shame and guilt. So, for example, you know, when I was 7 years old, I didn't make it to the school basketball team. And I felt so shameful. How am I going to go and tell my father that I wasn't good enough to make it to the football team? So this is like one small element of shame that I was carrying around as a 7-year-old. So it's us coming into that and understanding is like, it should not be shameful for me to share that I have something with my father right now, or with my wife, or with wherever it is. The power and the courage is understanding, yes, there is shame and guilt there, and I don't want it to sit in here anymore. I wanted to share it with someone. And guess what? If I share it, yes, the isolation suffering is gone, like I said, but it's going to come back to you and say, okay, this, you know, my feedback or my response to your current situation is this. So actually learning and understanding, what can I do with this? Once I've shared it, then I'm receiving support, then I'm receiving feedback, and that's when the beauty happens.
Yeah, and you can do something with it. And from your perspective, because I love normalizing this conversation for other men, what are the common topics that you have spotted while talking to other men that they particularly feel guilt and shame about? You know, if there's any kind of intertwined thread with all of us as a men collective, feeling the same patterns.
So there's two big ones. One is sexuality, which I'll get into, but the other one is more around about this call it scarcity around finances. But then over the last 2 or 3 months, actually, it's just sort of common theme that the scarcity, maybe around finances, is directly linked to this notion that men want to make their fathers proud of them. I recall when I was probably I was 11 years old, and I got 98 out of 100 for a maths test. And the person, I came first in class, and the person who came second, he got 87. So I was 11 points above him, and I was only 2 away from 100. And I went and I showed it to my father, and his response was, "Why didn't you get 100? You could get 98. Surely you could have got extra 2." And I was like, "Oh no." And it's like, all I wanted to do was make you proud of me. And then that turned into, led on to into football. I just wanted to be successful and play, you know, be the captain and score goals to make my father proud of me. And, you know, school, girls, education at university, making it to the university, it was like, when I look back and do all these sort of reflections, it was like, did I really want to do that? And what was the driver? And the driver was, I wanted to make my father proud of me. Then when we connect that to this scarcity around finances, one way that a lot of us men believe is that if I make money and I become successful and I have a lot of money in the bank, my father's going to be proud of me. That is really disjointed line between finding your life purpose, you know, which we may get onto later in the podcast, but without this life purpose, we're not doing something intrinsically, and it's external validation. And in one of the big cases that's coming up, it's external validation from our fathers.
Exactly.
The second one, like I mentioned before, is sexuality. There is so much shame and guilt when it comes to sexuality. Again, radical honesty. I'm going to share, a story which is very important for me to understand why I had shame around sexuality. So my sister was taught the virtues of how great a gift it is to give to her husband if she was married as a virgin. Mm-hmm. Greek Orthodox, we were raised as Greek Orthodox. So in that community, it was like, you know, the Mother Mary and my sister, the Virgin Mary, and my sister's name, funny enough, was also Mary. So there was this whole, you know, me being exposed. He was 4 years older than me. So growing up, me being exposed to, you know, having sex before marriage is not good. Mm-hmm. Then when I came into sort of my late teens, I was getting the opposite message from my father. That the more girls that I could sleep with, the more of a stud that I would be, or the more of a man that I would be. But as a young kid, you know, still in development stages of my childhood, in my teenage rather, it was like, hang on a second. If Mary, my sister, is not allowed to go and do it, but I am, but she's a girl, I'm a guy, she's not allowed to do it with other guys, and those guys that if they were to try to do it, they're bad boys. I'm allowed to do it, but I'm allowed to do it with girls, but there's a huge disjoint here. If Mary can't do it, who am I supposed to go and do it with? And then when I would go into a sexual encounter or intimate encounter with a lady, I always had in the back of my mind that I was either, you know, doing something, you know, if her father was to find out, then I'd be in trouble, or basically that I was contaminating her in some way. And I was just like, wanted to get in and get out. So yes, scarcity around money, deeply connected to our fathers, and this whole concept of, you know, it's we should be ashamed of sex when basically it's creation, it's life force, and this is a huge one as well.
Yeah, that's the big one for a lot of men that I coach as well. I talk to sexuality. It's extremely contaminated, especially from the male perspective. We'll get into this bit later, but let's move into the life purpose. We already mentioned that you know, the self-worth, you know, linked to the finances, linked to the self-actualization, also linked to transcending the external validation of approval from our fathers, from our teachers, from our school, from our jobs, from our bosses. You know, we conditioned on a certain level to prove ourselves, and men have this bone inside of themselves. They want to show how good and powerful they are. So if we move into from the space of this external validation and we step into inner validation, which is for me actualization of your life purpose, and how do you find your place in this world that is deeply connected to your soul, and you know what are you here to do and what is your purpose. How do we guide men into finding that? Because sometimes it's not that easy to really get that.
I think many times is not so easy. Sometimes probably an understatement. It's a difficult one because we are so busy. We are so busy doing so many different things. And when we are so busy doing many things, we don't even realize that the majority of times that we're doing something is just to, you know, it's this rat race of life. You know, I can't come up with a better word. And in this rat race, we have no idea, we haven't got the time to stop and to feel and to embody what we're actually feeling and ask ourselves, do I genuinely enjoy what I'm doing right now? I had a construction company in Australia, and I thought that I loved what I was doing because basically it was, there was great profits, and we did some projects where, I was able to buy my house, I was able to buy an apartment, I was able to buy the car that I wanted and live the lifestyle that I wanted. And my wife would keep asking me, are you sure you're happy? Is this really what you want? I was like, I'm successful. The business is growing. I started the company by myself. 4 years later, with 25 staff delivering projects all over Australia. Why wouldn't I be happy? But I never meditated. I never did any introspective work. And I had no idea to actually stop and ask myself, do I actually enjoy what I'm doing? And in the end, I realized, when I made the decision and I left to start that company to come and change my life, the happiness was coming from the external financial milestone. It wasn't coming because I was waking up every day saying, wow, I cannot wait to go and have this client meeting and to talk about my subcontractor and discuss the liquidated damages and all of this nonsense that was happening in that corporate world. That wasn't making me happy. So when I realized, at the time that I realized, okay, I didn't realize, immediately, what is my life purpose? But what one key point that is really going to help guys is to actually take a break. Take a break for yourself. And I know it's busy. Like I said, it's difficult. I know it's busy because, you might have children and whatever the obligations are that you have in your life, family, work, etc., maybe parents. Unless we actually stop, take some time to ourselves and actually make an intention that, okay, am I happy with what I'm doing? Majority of the times, people are not happy with what they're doing. And then if that's the first step, it's understanding, okay, I'm doing something now in my life which is not really making me wake up feeling super excited. And that's why I like to exaggerate when I'm about to say that we walk around like zombies all day. And then I see my father's generation. My father's 7 years old, and one of my greatest, probably not my greatest teacher and mentor, but his generation, not just him, but lots of his brothers, sisters, and his friends and his network, that age, let's say, they don't have life purpose, because they do whatever they need to do during the day, whether it's they're still working or if they're retired, they go and do some chores, and they come home, they sit in front of the television and just get brainwashed, with all these subliminal messages. And it's this life purpose. When I see that generation, that's why I see he's one of my best teachers, and I'm so grateful for that, because I can see that there is no life purpose there. His work life, he's retired and he's done what he's done right now, but there's no enjoyment to wake up every day and to move the body, to connect with nature, and to really just embrace the sun touching the skin. So again, the first thing is to come in and to ask yourself, what am I doing it? Am I enjoying it? And if not, then taking that time to say, what are my hobbies? What are my passions? What books do I like to read? What movies do I like to watch? And then from there, start to draw the dots that are joining or connecting to you to then sort of maybe build a pathway or a roadmap to something that you can bring to this world.
Exactly. And express it, because, with the life purpose, what I've also discovered myself is that when you understanding those threads and those connections, then you can create and curate your life so that you can express it. And usually people would say, but, can I really do this? Can I really do what I really love? That's a big conditioning. Can I really, be passionate every day? Is that a pipe dream? Is that something that only few selected people have, and everybody else needs to live in this blur? But it takes courage, to stop. And it also takes a little bit of deconditioning to step away from the matrix, because matrix at this moment in time, that we call the rat race, the corporate world, the business world, is so strong. It pulls people into this inertia of gravity, so people don't have time. And this is the reason why sometimes when people go to retreats or they get life coaching or they had mentorship, they can really reflect back into their life, breathe, and really ask those questions, which are powerful coaching questions. Am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Does this make my heart sing? Do I wake up with this amazing passion every day to seize the day with the glory instead of just bubbling along and going. And the good thing, Nico, that I witness right now is that it is possible. Sometimes, people don't even believe it's possible to live purposefully and to live fulfilled. But I know, and because you transformed your life, if I've transformed my life, I've witnessed many other people transforming theirs, it's possible for you to get in touch and live your life purpose.
It's absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. It's just, again, trust and faith that you have the capacity, and you do have the capacity. It's your absolute birthright to wake up, like you said, to have your heart sing every day. We absolutely have the capacity. It's the difficulty, it's the courage to, like you said, to also to express, that radical honesty, and to express, honey, or whoever it is that's close to your life, I don't really like what I'm doing anymore. And your partner is going to be so incredibly touched that you had that courage to share it, and then want to support you on, let's find something that does make you happy. So you can become a better father, a better husband, a better partner, a better lover, a better everything.
Yeah. So when it comes to body, because I also read on your website, and I saw the images on your website, and I really, that also touched me. How did you, let me ask you differently, how did you move away from the body image or the shape or the level of health that you have had at one point in your life, I think it was in your early 30s, when you looked in a certain way, into where you are right now, which is healthy, fit, feeling great in your body, feeling embodied, feeling rounded, feeling, strength? What was your journey? Because a lot of the people that I coach struggle with that. There is a big part of, I wish I had that body. I wish I've exercised. I wish I could eat healthy, but I can't. And there's always these excuses and, inabilities. So I'm just curious, what was your drive, and how did you move through this rite of passage when you arrived at the body that you are in right now? I mean, the shape.
Right. So this one goes back many, many, many years, even to when I was like 13, 14. I remember going to high school, meeting new kids. Again, this whole trauma, let's call it, that I had on trying to external validation led me to seek perfection. Yeah. And, now I know that perfection doesn't exist because things are changing in the moment. But me, coming from this space of wanting to achieve perfection, I used to go to the gym, and I used to take all these different supplements to shred the belly fat. I bought all the different ultimate workout machines that you could buy. Because for me, what was important is what I could see in front of the mirror at the gym, and look left and right to see that my biceps were bigger than the guy next to me. It was so ingrained, and it was actually difficult. You wouldn't think that it was really difficult for me to change, if ever, because looking back at my network in Australia now, they're still in that sort of same notion, and they can't see out. I would have been 30 or 31 years old, and we had visits a friend of my dad come and visit me, and he walked in, and he was old, and crouched down. I think he even had a walking stick, but you could just tell he needed a lot of time and effort just to get him from the front door to make his way to the couch. He stayed for about an hour or so, chugging on cigarettes, and then he left. And when he left, the conversation came up with my father, how long have you known this man? And through that conversation, I realized he was about 15 years younger than what I actually thought he was. So if, for example, I can't remember the date, but I would have, I thought he was 50, all the way around, but I thought he was 50, I thought he was 65.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? Like, this man is in pain. He is suffering. It doesn't look like he's enjoying his life whatsoever. And that was just like, it didn't really slap me in the face. It's like, okay, from now you're going to die. From now you're going to, change your life. But it really sunk in with me. And that's when slowly, I started to change my movement practice. So instead of training for, heavy weights and repetitions, which is just competition based, it's more now I'm practicing flowing and communicating on a different level with my body. Food, understanding that organic food, but that was the first input into food and nutrition, is like, what is organic food? And then I started to go into that whole rabbit hole and say, what? They're actually spraying our food. If it's not organic, they're actually spraying our food with all these pesticides and herbicides. And it was basically understanding that, okay, on all these different modules or modalities, rather, let's say, in my life that are connected to the body, whether it's, food, nutrition, movement, connected with nature, it's all about me understanding. It's like, I want to be happy, and I don't want to have a walking stick at 65, and I don't want to, I don't want to look 65 when I'm 50. So it's this whole longevity and sustainability. It's like, I want to be as happy and as healthy as I can mentally and physically, in addition to my emotional and spiritual connection as well. But on a physical level, I'm going to be as happy and as healthy as I can when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old.
What a wonderful initiation. I think it's always good, to get into that practice. And so did it take you a lot of time? Did you have a courage not to give up and to keep on moving and practicing? So what do you think it's necessary for men who are listening and they think, okay, I'm not fit right now. I'm relating to what Nico is saying. I can see those examples in my life. I want to become fit, healthy, eat healthy, and so on and so forth. What do you think is necessary for people, first of all, to commit and then to sustain and then to become that version of themselves?
First thing you have to do is write down all the reasons why you can't do it. I am too busy. I don't have time. I am injured. I need to find a physiotherapist. The gym's too far from my house. Write them all down. And once you've written them all down and you're happy, and then you might get 20 or 30 or 40, I've done this exercise with guys before. They've written up to 100 different reasons, trying to be as specific as they can. Look, I can't actually do this. Then you look at those and you go, wow, these are nothing more than excuses, nothing more than self-limiting beliefs. I have the power to be happy and healthy in my body. I have the sovereignty in my life. And it starts with my life. It starts with my physicality, because how do I experience this life? Through all of the awareness that comes in? Through the physicality. And it's like a child's, when I used to play the Sega or the Nintendo when I was younger, we used to start off in round one, and the more rounds you go, the more lives you connect, but then you get like bigger arms and more armor, and basically build a stronger and stronger avatar. And that stronger avatar can jump higher and can swim deeper and do all these things. We can do the exact same thing. We really can. So my physicality now, I'm almost 42 compared to when I was 29, 30 years old, when I used to go to the gym and just push ridiculous amounts of excessive weights, is completely different. I can do things now. I can go climbing with my friends. I can swim in the sea and then dunk dive and come back up and then climb all the way around, over the mountain and come back in again. I can do things now that I couldn't do 12 years ago or 10 years ago. So it's all about, again, sustainability. So back to your question, I know I segued a little bit. Understand that every single time that you're telling yourself, the biggest one is it's too late and it's too difficult for me to change it around.
Exactly.
Go to my website and have a look at my before and after. I was 31 and 41. And at 31, it was very easy for me also to say, I'm done. I've lifted all the way.
Too late. No, that I was really inspired when I saw that image on your website. I'm going to share it in the description of the podcast. It's good for people to see, the versions, because that's also empowering. And I also think that it's commitment, perseverance, determination, and also wanting to be healthy and wanting to be vibrant, alive, because you're absolutely right. Our physicality is the most important part of ourselves, aspect of us that lives this life right now. And that leads me into sexuality, because I think when we're physically strong and fit and we have this body that we really want to enjoy, then we can move into positive sexuality and having a great sexual relationship. And let's talk a little bit about that. We mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that a lot of the shame and guilt is attached to this, and that men particularly, don't understand or cannot find their way into it. And it's always taboo to discuss as well with other men as well, to share, how is that part of your aspect. There's secrecy, there is veil around all of this. So if you're initiating men into the most positive expressions of themselves through their sexuality with their partners, what is that about? How can we get into that space? And how can we emerge to really, really enjoy sexuality as a creative act that really empowers us and empowers our partners and, co-creates the most beautiful sensations, but also realities, I would say. What would be your take on that?
How long we got left? We can a whole podcast, if not a whole podcast, the whole...
No, I know we can record the whole podcast on that, but just the essence. I mean, we have, not that much time, but it will be just, yeah.
I was joking. This is such a, because I suffered a lot. I suffered a lot as a man with my sexuality. I've been shameful about the size of my penis before. I remember I was 17 years old and I walked into a play, I made it to the all-age team. Average age is say 28, 29. And, as a 17-year-old having to get naked in the dressing rooms for the first time with other men, it was like, I didn't even see this. I didn't go up and measure mine against his, but just my notion was my self-belief system was telling me, you're the youngest here, so you have the smallest penis, so you need to walk around and like pretend that you're not the, we all suffer from it. And it's like, guys, the first step is understanding that there is suffering there. And someone else might say, no, I'm super confident. I've slept around. It's like, okay, but then ask yourself, why are you so confident? And why do you want to sleep around with so many different ladies? What is that mask that you're wearing that you're trying to hide? What is that insecurity there? So it's coming back into understanding that love is creation. And like you said, co-creation. There is nothing more beautiful than two people coming together in divine union. So to answer the question, is that one? Firstly, is the understanding that there is shame and guilt there, and going into that and understanding why it's there. The second thing I would be to share is that all of this, this information overload that we receive from pornography and from, the internet sites and all this stuff is like this hard and fast, and all these romantic movies where the best lovers are those guys who, grab their woman, and, all of this is nonsense. The more work I do with men and with their women as well, is like the women want to be touched and massaged and spoken to and given a real sense of intimacy and understanding that, I shared something on this actually, which is very connected to this, where a lot of times men go home and when they grab their wife or they hug their wife or that's the first time that they see them in the afternoon, there's a little bit of not flirtatious energy. It comes from like a little bit of a sexual energy there. And it's like, where is that coming from? And I posed the question to men many times, like, when you go and hug your wife tonight, forget that sex is even an option. Get that sex, pretend that you have a band-aid over your penis because you cut it or it's broken or it's bruised, but it's out of the question, and just go and hug her from the depths of your heart. And they're looking at me like, how do I do that? I said, exactly, let's learn that. And ask yourself, how many times have you gone home because you saw a successful guy on television who's killing you now, or you saw a guy that you haven't seen in 10 years and he looks like he has a great body, and then you're taking that, you're basically becoming like more submissive because, wow, this guy is better than me now, so you're all sort of contracting. And with that contracted space, you go home to hug your wife and you want to feel better. And how do you feel better as a man who's just been submissive? You want to have sex to prove yourself that I am a man. So it's genuine intention. You made a devotion to your partner. Go back to that devotion, find the love, and come from that space when you're with her.
I think that was the essence of the transmission. Thank you so much for that, because I think that topic in itself, as you said, it's gigantic, but I think that the most essential point we managed to land for the people who are listening, that thank you so much for that. So slowly getting towards the end of our recording today, we can talk so long. So one of the things that I really loved about, your men's work is moving people from worrying about life, being somebody who consistently worries and is concerned and is struggling, into becoming the warrior in life. So just to kind of wrap it up, tell me, how do you see this transition? What really happens in moving ourselves from consistent worrying, concern, and into stepping into our true manhood and becoming these warriors that we came here to be on a certain level?
Right. So it goes back to what we've already shared in the podcast. The first one is shame, and understanding that shame and guilt, those two things are castrating us as men, because there's shame and guilt, whether it's sex or whether it's about scarcity of finances or, seeking perfection, it's connected to our masculine core. And so that's the first thing. And then it's building a daily practice. My daily practice, it's a little bit, I'm blessed. I have the first 4 hours of my day are just for me. But building that meditation is key, because during your morning meditation and movement practice and whatever it looks like for you, you might be reading or journaling. It comes back into when I said before in the podcast, it's like we need to take time, and I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing. So it's regulating the nervous system, coming back and understanding, what am I doing? And if you're not really enjoying what you're doing, but you're genuinely connected to, I want to become happier and I want to become a better person. This 2-month journey, which is a little bit warrior to warrior, as you mentioned, is all about guys coming in, removing the shame and guilt, removing things in their life that don't serve them anymore, and then understanding, okay, through food, through nutrition, through other physical modalities, but of course through sharing the emotions, all of this comes together, and the warriness gets to starts to vape away, and coming into our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual strength is how we get onto that path of becoming a warrior.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Nico. You can also find more about Nico at bearnico.com. On that website, you can, have a special offer when it comes to coaching retreats. You can also go to Nico's social media pages, Instagram, and also YouTube. We're going to reference all of this in the description of the podcast so you can enjoy collaboration, partnership, and the services that Nico has to offer in initiating you to the best possible version of yourself. So just one last question for you, Nico. What is the practice or something that you would love to leave our audience with? Usually at the end of the podcast, I always ask all the guests to share something that I can now, after listening to this, because it's empowering me, it's elevating me, start doing immediately. So any kind of token of wisdom that you want to drop into this field for people to play with?
Meditate. Why? It might sound cliche or taboo or hippie even to some people, but there is so much resistance in meditating that it's that resistance right there. And like I jump into the ice bath every day. Every single time there's resistance, but I do it every single day just to break that resistance. When I say meditate, of all the different modalities, whether it's food or nutrition or training or doing things outside of what you're usually used to doing, meditation is always the most difficult, because just to sit in a seated position for 10, 15, 20 minutes a day without your eyes closed and just focusing on your breathing is so difficult. All of the ancient cultures, they all have a space at the time for meditation, whether they call it meditation or whatever else is, it's connecting to the source. And in that meditation, you're breaking the resistance, but you're also understanding what's coming up. And there's things that are coming up, let them pass by and come back to the breath. But 9 times out of 10, that stuff that is coming up is the stuff that you don't want in your life. And it goes back to understanding, okay, if I'm not doing, how can I achieve my life purpose? Is by removing these things that keep coming up every day. So, there's many different modalities, but if I had to pick one and one only, 20-minute minimum meditation every single morning, 0 excuses. If it means you need to put your alarm on 20 minutes earlier, do so. If it means you need to drive down the street into a quiet area because at home, whatever it is, meditation every single morning.
Thank you so much, Nico, for joining us today. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this podcast and for your lovely comments. We're following our community on Spotify, but we're extremely active. So thank you guys for heads up, for listening, for commenting, and for enjoying this elevation that we all experience and co-create together. Once again, Nico, lovely to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your presence, and the beauty that you shared with us today. I hope a lot of men who are listening to this podcast will receive this transmission in the most powerful way. They would know and understand that now it's also time for us as a collective men to initiate and become the best and most optimal versions of ourselves. So thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Zoran, to you and to your team for putting this together. Thank you so much.